Welcome to another episode of the Community Podcast, a conversational podcast exploring the stories, insights, and strategies behind learning-centric communities. Our mission is to inspire listeners by highlighting individuals who are shaping the future of how people come together to learn, grow, and thrive. I am super excited today to welcome Jace Wallace, founder of Uhsteem and the creator behind The Daily. Jace's work sits at the intersection of personal development, entrepreneurship, and community building. Jace's philosophy centers around his North Star, people, purpose, and paper, and how simple, action-based tools can drive real impact. We're going to dive into Jace's background, all the great work he's done. We've had some awesome conversations so far, and can't wait to see everybody benefit from this great episode. Jace, it's awesome to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Long time coming. I had some crazy stuff happening on the personal side, but now, better late than never. It's
Yeah.
always great to have awesome folks like you on our show and really helping us build great understanding of the awesome work that you're doing. So, Jace, let's kick things off by telling the audience a little bit about your background. I know you have a very varied experience in many different domains. So, I'd love to hear kind of how you came to do what you're doing today.
Yeah. So I would say my creative experience really began at the age of 12, and it began in the Toys R Us checkout line. I think I was buying like Spider-Man on PlayStation. And when I was at the checkout line, I saw Magic's Music Maker for PlayStation 2. It was a beat machine exclusively for the PlayStation 2. And so yeah, I saved up, worked hard over the summer, got my copy of it, and then from there, I just began making music. And so from making music for myself, I ended up making music for friends. And what that led to was just a whole community worth of entrepreneurship and creativity. And so I think that was my first taste of what it's like to not only create, but then also to have a community behind you. And so that really began my experience. And so from the age of 12, really to about the age of 20, I was really focused on music. And then I transitioned into the film process and world at the age of like 19, 20. And then from there, focused again still on music, directing music videos, which led to then directing commercials to short films, so on and so forth. And then that led me back to music. When the pandemic hit, it led me back to music with having so much downtime. I was forced to sit still in a lot of ways. And so that allowed me to truly find my passion for music again. And with that, I was able to create new music, release new music. And that really led to the first products that ended up becoming Esteem and led me to the point that I'm at now. So it's been a journey. It's been like a 25-year journey, but it's been fun.
Yeah, I remember you sharing that we're the same age, Jace, right? So we're both 36 going on 37.
Yep.
And it's crazy how our careers, I think everybody's careers evolves in unexpected ways. I think folks tend to naturally gravitate back to something that gave them joy when they were younger, right? So that experience of being able to create music when you were 12, it kind of boomeranged back later in your life, right? After you'd done a couple other things and explored other creative pursuits, you found your calling kind of back where you started, right? So it kind of came full circle for you. Tell us a little bit about how you founded Esteem. I'm not sure if I ever asked you, Jace, but what does Esteem actually stand for? What's the meaning behind the word?
Well, STEAM starts basically from the original idea that it starts with you. And so any change that you want, any self-esteem, social esteem, any esteem that you have for yourself, it always begins with you. And so that was really the idea behind esteem. And so it is always looking inward, looking at you first. And then from there, then we can start looking at the world and how we fit into it and how we relate to it. So yeah, esteem really is just a combination of the idea that it starts with you and also giving you empowerment to move forward in your life and your development.
Have there been challenges in your personal life, Jace, that you think really inspired you to develop this tool, which we're going to dive into in much greater detail over the course of the episode? But were there any speed bumps, if you will? Were there any challenges that really inspired you to think to yourself, I have to look within, I have to introspect, right? Because it takes a lot of courage to do that, actually, right? And there's a lot of us, and I can include myself in this group as well, who maybe are late to looking inwards, right? We
Yeah.
tend to look at everything else that's happening in the world and maybe not point fingers, but at least mentally think about, other things being the problem and not ourselves. So I'd love to hear if maybe there was a particular experience in mind that kind of inspired you to look inwards.
Yeah, yeah, there was. I think for me, the genesis of really what to do next came from I was doing a tour from LA to Indianapolis to New York. It was called Be Somebody Sessions. And we had done the LA show and then we had done the Indianapolis show. And I think the biggest hurdle was getting back over to New York, which at the time we didn't end up accomplishing. And I think that really sat me down at that time too, because I had this grand plan of spring LA, summer Indianapolis, and then fall New York. And it just didn't materialize into that. But what did materialize was the daily. It was taking this moment to find ways to celebrate what we did accomplish. And I think that is the most important thing within the daily, the champagne moments. You get a moment to celebrate an accomplishment you had before you start to layer on future accomplishments. So it gives you an opportunity to look back in the past at a beautiful moment that has occurred as opposed to looking back at something negative that has occurred in your life. And so that was really the genesis of it. It's just finding moments that I can be proud of, that I can use as fuel to move forward into my future. But because although we didn't hit New York, we had so much other success along the way, from creating our first book to going cross country for shows and being able to connect with people in different cities. So it was a lot for us to be thankful for and a lot for me to be thankful for and accomplish. And I learned so much in between, just the fact of like how to really pivot from state to state, city to city, location to location, people to people. I learned a lot within that, and that just transitioned into other platforms that I've created. So it's all been a beautiful thing, but that really gave me a moment at that time, which was November of 2022 or 2021, to really settle into what's next and how do I find success moving forward and what does it look like for me moving forward.
One of the common trends of all the guests I've had on this podcast, Chase, is that many of them found their calling or they found something that really motivated them because it served a need in their personal experience, right? So you're echoing that, right? So you have all these shows that you're always on the road and there's so many things that you're overwhelmed, I think. I think a lot of us are. There's information overload, there's notifications that are blowing up, and we're trying to process everything on a day-to-day basis. And many of us are just kind of treading water mentally, right?
Yeah.
I think if we were to do a litmus test on the average American or the average listener, I think it's everywhere in the world, we're all overwhelmed. We have very little cognitive bandwidth remaining to focus
Hmm.
on stuff that we care about, maybe, right? Because we're just trying to survive day to day. So taking that approach of the daily allows you to be very deliberate in resetting what you're doing. I'm going to pause. I'm going to take a breather. I'm going to take note of what I can celebrate, that small win from this past week, from this past month, from the past 24 hours, right? I've accomplished something, right, that I'm
Yeah.
proud of. And I want to use that as fuel to kind of take me to the next step. So I think that's immensely important for people to hear because we don't do enough of it, right? I think it's easy for us to fall into, like I was mentioning earlier, you may be pointing fingers at others and not respecting. It's also very human to think about all the negatives and not the positives, right? So,
Hmm.
an exercise like incorporating this into your daily routine, which we're going to talk about as well, is something that really allows you to kind of recapture that mental that frame of reference, right? That mental health that maybe you otherwise wouldn't be able to take advantage of. And personally, I think one of the things that keeps me going, and I've been asking, as I talk to more entrepreneurs, I'm getting the sense that a lot of people share this approach as well, is at the end of every day, most of the time we're overwhelmed thinking about what we want to do the next day, right?
Hmm.
I think the daily does a beautiful job in being able to celebrate small wins, among other things, right? But at the end of the day, think of the next day and just put down one thing on a post it note or write it down in the daily as to one thing that you want to accomplish the following day. That can serve as a healthy litmus test for progress and for your mental health, right? I got through the one thing that I said I was going to get through last night, right?
Yeah.
And you keep
Yeah.
consistently doing that, you're building a healthy habit. So there's so much psychology that goes into this that we can leverage when it comes to this type of a framework. I think there's a lot to be said for that. So, Jace, tell me a little bit about when you designed the daily, and I'm going to open this up because you've made reference to one of the tools which I love, which is the champagne moment. And it says right in the workbook, it's a moment to reflect on a positive experience or achievement from yesterday. So essentially what I just described about something in the last 24 hours. Celebrating your wins, big or small, sets a positive tone for today's journey, right? How did you come up with these awesome categories? You know, you have champagne moments, you have setting work goals, you have affirmations. What inspired you to kind of categorize these parts of the day in such a thoughtful way?
Yeah. Well, most of them came from a lot of the work that but I was doing them as individual parts where it was like I was focused on my affirmations. I had my goals. I had things that I was celebrating the day before, and I didn't have all this into one concise framework that would allow me to check things off of my day for completion and, feel successful every day as opposed to letting days pass me by. I found these tools to be very important for me to find success in everything in every way that I participate in the world. And so I brought a lot of those ideas and put those into one framework that helps create a daily system of success for anyone who completes the daily. So yeah, it was essentially a combination of a lot of the things and a lot of the tools and a lot of the resources I've been using as I move throughout my journey and to find success.
Yeah, so like distilling those best practices. This
100%.
works for me. I enjoy it. I'm sure it's going to work for others. And when it's so beautifully laid out, it's inviting, right? Like I was telling you that my wife looked at this and she was like, "Oh my God." And she loves planners. And she's like, just how inviting it is, how aesthetically pleasing it is to be able to go through something. And, you know, again, the tactile exercise of putting pen to paper, of really taking that time away from a screen for crying out loud, right? I mean, what's the
Hmm.
first thing we look at when we wake up? Our phones. And more often than not, I think the last thing we look at before we go to sleep is our phones these days, right? So we're continuously surrounded by these screens, and to be able to just set aside 5 or 10 minutes a day, let me go through what I've done. What am I grateful for, right? What are my goals for today? What's my affirmation? I think
Yeah.
this is an incredibly empowering exercise overall, right? So let me ask you this, Jace. When you see the daily as a tool that can be implemented in so many different settings, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about it in terms of the work that you've done in recovery centers with nonprofits at college campuses. Tell us a little bit more about that. How has that journey been, and kind of what are you seeing? Where do you see the daily really being a very powerful tool?
I think the journey has been very rewarding, especially in those particular segments, because it's an opportunity to really find someone as they're transitioning. It's a very notable and noticeable transition because the fact that you're leaving a physical space and transitioning somewhere, as opposed to, just from the outside world perspective, if you're leaving a job, it's typically with you staying within the same area that you're in, like you're still living within the same home, still within the same space. But when you are working with segments and industries where they're physically leaving and transitioning into somewhere else, this really is a great space and a great reminder for them to have something to hold on to as they transition into that. So when it comes to those spaces like colleges, when it comes to recovery centers, it's really great at build number one, creating a new routine, but then also two, maintaining that routine. And so we found that to be very successful and very rewarding within those segments because it allows them to have something to have for themselves as they transition into their new spaces.
I think it's such a powerful framework that can translate into all these different settings, right? And as you continue to take the daily on the road and publicize it more to different groups of partners or whoever else out there might be benefiting from it, and I hope we get to see an uptick in interest in this awesome resource. I think the use cases for how helpful this can be as a tool will continue to grow, right? Because again, it is so applicable to so many different settings. It has that universality almost that a lot of other tools I think lack. And then when I think about this too, it drives towards the idea of your mission, right, Jace? Because having chatted with you now multiple occasions, really enjoying this artifact of your hard work, right, which I have in my hands, what is it that's driving you? People have a tool like this in their hands, they see the amazing work that you're doing, but what is the end goal, right? How do you see this really affecting something bigger? What's that goal for you at the end of the road?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest goals for me at the end of the road is for Esteem to have a footprint on all seven continents, whether that's through products, whether that's through experiences, or whether that's through just even resources, but to have a footprint on all continents because I believe the work that we're doing is extremely important because it's going to allow for imagination to run wild in people, allow for us to experience new creations that we would never experience. We would experience new relationships that we never saw coming. We'll be experiencing new foundations for people, for purpose, and for paper all over the world. And I think that just really excites me, just the opportunity to see the benefits that other people can get for themselves, for their purpose, and for the paper. Um, monetarily and that they're using as a resource as well. So whether that's seeing an uptick in their financial way of life because they're using the daily or also too just through using the paper that we've manufactured it with to give to you as well. So it's a lot of opportunity there for people. And I'm just excited just to see the growth that people get from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did you come up with the framework, Jay? Because it was a perfect segue into one of the questions I had for you, which is I love alliteration. So anytime I see like three or four concepts that start with the same letter, it's very memorable for me and it really helps to ground concepts and principles. And I love this idea of people, purpose, and paper. People and purpose, I definitely get a sense of that's what's driving you, right? The paper, I mean, the physical paper that the daily is constructed from is very high quality, right? How did those come about? Like maybe when along, at what point in your journey did you come upon these three things as being kind of your guiding principles?
Yeah. I mean, I think they all just naturally formed over time, but I think the first time I used it is when I spoke with you about
Oh,
that.
really?
Oh yeah, 100%. Funny
No
that
way.
last time you had mentioned it, and I'm like, yeah, you had mentioned it in the primer. I'm like, oh snap, I got to hold on to that. So I've been writing it down everywhere now and everything because it is something that is like the guiding principle now. But they've all been important to me from the people that we serve, from their purpose that we're helping them achieve, and then the paper that we use it's all
Yeah.
been important and all been, so I think really it's just been an opportunity for us to bring all three of those together, really
Yeah.
continue to serve the people that we're serving at a high
That's right.
level through the paper, through their purpose, and through the people.
And it unifies it. It brings it into the physical realm, right?
Yeah,
Which again kind of like reinforces what we said earlier about so much of this stuff that we try, the output of our efforts
yeah,
day to day seems to be all in the digital realm. Oh, it's in the cloud, it's on a Google Doc, whatever, right? Like, but no, this is on paper,
a hundred
right?
percent.
You
Mm-hmm.
can touch it, you can feel it, you can go back to it, you can cherish it, you can hold it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I had my parents visit a couple of weeks ago, just going to go on a brief tangent to talk about the power of paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, my son was born in mid-November, so he's 2 months and some change old. I was like, Mom, bring the photo album with all my baby photos when you show up, because my wife wanted to see them. And I had last seen it probably when I was living at home in high school or something.
Yeah,
But I knew exactly where it was. I was like, Mom, it's in the chest of drawers that's collecting dust for 20 years now. It's on the top shelf, right? She's like, yeah, don't worry, I'll bring it for you. And so she brought home that album when she came to visit us. And man, it was like a rush of memories, you know? And
mm-hmm.
these were photos from the early 90s. And what my mom had done was maybe not painstakingly, she loves to write and do things, but at least to me, it seems like it was painstakingly. Next to every single photo that she took of me, in my crib or whatever I was doing, she put the date, she put the occasion, and she put the age that I was at. And this is before iPhones.
Wow.
We're talking decades before digital stuff, right? So
Mm-hmm.
she actually had the wherewithal. This is back in the day when you had film, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to take it on a little roll, got to get it processed, got to bring it back. She actually documented like my journey as a toddler from a baby all the way to when I was 5 or 6 years old in a physical album, right?
Wow.
And now one of the most cherished things I have that I own is that album, right? That's the power of paper, right? Pen to paper. She literally, that is her handwriting. For every single photo, she wrote down those three things. Farhan was 10 days old when I took this photo. This is his first birthday, right? That's going to last generations. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
pass that down to my kid, and my kid's stuff is all on the iPhone, whatever, right? But
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
wife and I are now inspired to actually create a physical album for him,
Yeah,
the same way that my
100%.
mom did it for me, right? So that's the
Wow.
power of taking something that is perhaps not physical and in the digital ether that we're
Mm-hmm.
in, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the power.
Mm-hmm.
When we didn't have the digital ether, it was all paper. It was all physical, right? And you're
Yep.
kind of bringing that back in such a meaningful way. So just wanted to share that personal anecdote because I think it's a really nice example of how we do need to kind of rediscover what it
Mm-hmm.
means to feel and connect with paper and words and the things that move us,
Yeah,
because those are mementos that can be passed down, that can be
100%.
remembered and cherished decades later. So very powerful there, Jace. One of the things that I wanted to ask you too, Jace, is when we think about community, right? So the reason I talk about community a lot is because it's so near and dear to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
You know, entrepreneurs around the world, they're selling products, they're selling services, they're building their brands, they're doing great things to elevate the work that they do. But what really transcends individuals and companies is when they can tap into the power of community,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'd love for you to reflect on how that has been going for you, right? How has the daily and the work that you've been doing at Esteem, how is it nurturing community in your own words?
Yeah, extremely impactful, I believe, what we're doing with community. I think one of the most important things is creating a safe space. How do we create a safe space where someone can come, be themselves, engage with other people, and learn something about themselves and the people around them? And so that's always number one in the forefront when we do any engagement with community. So that's been going really well. Another thing that I think is really impactful with community has been really centered around the daily and finding ways for community to come together and share goals and share ideas in ways that, again, push the community forward, push culture forward, but then push the future forward with more ideas. And so that's been really good as well, to just have people share and be open to sharing, even through the collaborations that we have coming up with the partnerships, and then working with the team that we had to even build the daily. It was such a collaborative experience of bringing together three or four different artists from three or four different walks of life, and us coming together to build and create, the daily has been really rewarding as well. So when it comes to community, I think just the biggest thing is really to create a safe space, number one, and then number two, create a space for people to actually create for themselves, and not just create a space for information, but create a space for action.
Tell me more about that, Jace. I love that idea. What does it mean to create a space for action?
I mean, I think one of the simplest ways to create a space for action is really to be open to passing the mic. So have a space where other people can talk back. It's not just focused on a conversation on stage. It's focused on a conversation in the room. So I think that's one of the ways that I really enjoy creating a space for action, where you create a space for people to interact, and then also to create a space where they have prompts, or they have questions, or they have ideas that push them forward into their thinking, as a way for them to reflect on themselves for a better outcome or a different outcome in the future.
I think the two are so intertwined, right? When you have a safe space, individuals within that safe space are that much more open
Hmm.
to being able to speak their minds, right?
Yeah.
So when
So,
the mic is passed to them, right, they're not going to try to sugarcoat what they're saying. They're going to say it genuinely, right?
yeah.
Because they know that what they're going to be said is going to be heard and at least acknowledged. Maybe not agreed, right?
Yeah.
You may not agree with what somebody's saying, but at least they know that what they're sharing is not going to be dismissed outright. I think that's a very valuable tool when it comes to community building, because I think a lot of times, and I'm in so many different communities now that it's probably a little embarrassing that I don't actively participate in all of them. And for various reasons, but the ones that I really enjoy being a part of are the ones that have gone out of their way to create that shared space for reflection and critical thinking and pushing back on ideas in a respectful way, but having that, those values kind of really shine through how people are contributing to the growth of the community, right? Which, again, I think those are ingredients for success. Now, you mentioned, Jace, that you want to take this to all seven continents. You want to take the daily and the work that you're doing at Esteem to all seven continents. I love that. So literally world domination all the way down to Antarctica, right, where
Oh
the
yeah,
penguins are,
yeah.
right? What's your vision for this year? I mean, we're turning the page on a new year, kind of 2026, 2027. Are there specific goals that you've outlined? You know, I know we're going to do some partnership stuff that I'm super excited about, but
Hmm.
where do you see the next 12 to 18 months, you know, as an entrepreneur? What are some of the key goals that you're working towards?
Yeah, I think some of the important goals that we're working towards is really to create a system where people can get the experience and the products and the resources and the community all in one, and really working on a way for that to become pretty much like a one-stop shop, a very tight-knit community in the sense of the products and the services and the tools and what we're creating for that to all work in a very uniform way. So that's number one. And then number two, I think another important one also is the daily for kids and having that present because I see it as an opportunity for not only for adults to see growth within their selves, but then also for the kids to see that within themselves as well. And then also too, to have it for the parents and the kids relationship as well, to be able to strengthen that bond between parents and their children as well. So it's a great opportunity there as well. And then I would say number three is really starting to make some traction on our next continent. You know, we're currently in the United States primarily. We want to start in North America primarily, but we want to see what those other continents and other spaces can look like as well. So we have some traction and we have some thoughts and ideas of some different programming and productions that we want to do in the other countries as well. So I think that's going to be a great transition as we start to move into these other territories and other continents as well.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there, Jay. I mean, it's exciting to just hear how ambitious your vision is in terms of taking this forward, not only in terms of localizing it for different cultures and countries and geographies, but also just the approach that it's such a universal framework. Again, that idea of it can help adults, it can help children, it can help teenagers, I'm sure. It could be something for every age group, right? If it's designed a certain way and if it's reflecting or if it's ensuring that the participants, that the folks that are using it are able to reflect on what matters to them, right? What's going to matter to a child is going to be different from what matters to a teenager versus an adult kind of thing, right? But you have those fundamental building blocks in place to really be able to just make certain tweaks and then have it be a resource that can be a game changer for somebody else in a different context. And we've talked a little bit about the translation and the localization piece. This can be a global tool, right? It definitely can be an international empowerer, right? If I can call it that. So very, very exciting. And then when you think about, I guess, what would you like to tell somebody in a similar position? That's one of the questions that I like to ask folks who join the podcast as my guests is maybe there's somebody out there listening and they're like, man, I've wanted to build community, right? And now Jace is doing this, he's doing this in a very creative way as somebody who's spent decades in the creative arts. But maybe they're not creative, right? Or maybe they have their own talent in some way. Somebody who is as intent as you are and as passionate about you are in terms of providing something that can be a tool for others that can build community, what advice would you give them?
I would say start with where you are. Start with where you are, start with what you have. I would say that I think that's the most important thing you can do is to start with where you are and start with what you have. And then from there, and I say that to take some of the ambiguity out of it, I say it with saying that look at the either the problems that you see that other people are facing, or look at the problems that you see that you are facing and find a way to inspire others to want to find change with that as well. Because that's essentially all we're doing, you know, whether it's a product, a service, or tool, it's essentially solving a problem in a new way for other people, you know. And so start with where you are and start with what you have. And I think, you know, that passion, that purpose, and, you know, the people will find themselves. But start with the purpose and then the people will come for sure.
Yeah, and I think maybe to add to that, the one other thing that I'll say is, don't settle for something just because you stumble once or twice or whatever the case might be. Keep on keeping on, kind of thing, right? If
Yeah.
you have that North Star, like in your case, Jace, I think your North Star has always been, I want to build something, create something that's going to empower people, right? I mean, even looking at the daily right now, it says at the very bottom, the workbook to start each day with a clear vision and an empowered mindset. So in some ways, you're actually putting your purpose right on your product, right?
Yeah.
It's bold right on the front cover there for folks that see the video later, right? So you're being so deliberate and so upfront with this is why this matters. That, when you only had one of these published, you could have looked at this and said, that's why I'm doing this, right? So you're staying the course. And of course, over the past few years now, you've gone this far because you stayed the course.
Yeah.
So, with entrepreneurs, I think it's crucial, and I can speak to myself maybe first, be able to preach to myself before I tell others to do something differently, is to really, don't get disheartened. Don't feel like there's going to be days that are not going to be as glorious, right? But when you have that purpose, and especially if you have it so well laid out in front of you that you can look at it, refer to it, you have that purpose, you surround yourself with the right people, and you're driving towards that goal. It's only a matter of time before you'll be able to really see where that takes you. We're getting towards the end of the recording, Jace. Before I ask one final question, I'd love to have you reflect on anything that we shared or share anything else that you'd like to speak to our audience about.
I think I'll reflect on what we've shared. I think one of the most important things that's kind of stood out to me in this conversation really is the impact that community can have just around the world. From even how you and I met, we met through community that was built out here in Los Angeles, from a mutual friend of ours. And although you and I haven't physically met, we've had a relationship over the last 6 to 9 months just over the internet, which has been great. And we've been speaking once or twice a month. And so it really does create that opportunity for you to build community no matter where you are. And I think that's what's really been reflective, just even in our conversation and in our friendship, that no matter where you are, no matter who you are, there's community out there for you. And as long as you're walking in your purpose, and you will find the people. And so that's the biggest thing that I really have reflected on just within this conversation. It's just brought it all full circle for me.
That means a lot, Jason. I think, again, in our ever digital world, we got to find the right balance. Certain things, yes, if you have the capacity, the time, the energy, please try to do in person. Please
Yeah.
try to get out there and meet people and nurture that community by physically being there, right? But then you got to also see the other side of the coin, which is you can do a lot virtually, like you're describing, right? You're in California, I'm in Boston, right? So a physical meetup may not be possible at all times. And in our case, it hasn't happened yet, but I hope that changes, right? But we've made so much progress in
Yeah.
what we've been able to do virtually, right? So you definitely do want to find the right balance, right? When you're building community, but also be genuinely present in
Yeah.
whatever capacity that you're in, right? Whether that's virtual or physical or whatever the case might be. My last question for you, Jace, as we wrap up is where can folks find out more about your work at Uhsteem? What are the best resources? I'll make sure to put all the links in the show notes, but wanted to give you that opportunity.
Okay. You can find out more about Esteem at Uhsteem.com, which is UHSTEEM.com. Also, that's our handle on social media platforms, which is at UHSTEEM, Esteem. Or you can follow me personally at I am Oliver last name on all platforms as well, which is I am, so IAMOLIVERLASTNAME. I am Oliver last name.
Of course, Jason. I'll make sure all the links are in the show notes, and we're going to make sure that people can find you and really leverage the amazing work that you've done, especially with the daily, but also the other work that you're doing in so many different ways, leveraging your creativity, your unique lived experiences, coast to coast networking that you're doing, building these partnerships. It's all very empowering and very rewarding to see as somebody who got to know you recently, and I hope this friendship continues for many more years to come. Thank you so much, Jace, for being on the Community podcast. It was awesome having you.
Thank you for having me. That's been great.